Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of Overcoming Depression and Anxiety, brought to you by Healthy Me Summits. I'm Joanna Rushton, your host, and we're being joined here today by the beautiful JJ Virgin. Celebrity nutrition and fitness expert, JJ Virgin is author of 4 New York bestsellers, a frequent blogger of Huffington Post and Mind Body Green, and is also a popular guest on numerous TV and radio shows. It's a very warm welcome to you, JJ. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Well, thank you. I love what you're doing and I love the topic, so I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Well, on the topic, I know that you yourself have experienced what it's like to deal with anxiety in your own personal life, and also mental health challenges within your family. Would you be happy to connect with us and share a little bit about what that has been for you?
Yeah, I've had a little anxiety today, as a matter of fact, Joanna. But I have definitely got more of that personality type that lends itself to anxiety, and I've been that way for years and years and years. So much so that I remember I went to the doctor in my early 30s for what I thought was asthma. And he's like, no, this is not asthma. I went to a respiratory doctor. He goes, this is anxiety. I go, this is not anxiety, right? It couldn't be anxiety. And at the time, I was a fitness expert. I wasn't into nutrition at that point at the level I am now. And he put me on Zoloft. And that really helped me start the journey to figure out how to do these things naturally, because Zoloft helped with anxiety. Like, I could breathe, but it basically flatlined my personality. There was no ups and no downs. It was straight across the board. And then I learned a lot about both using exercise to help with anxiety, but really dialing in my diet, and that a lot of the things I've been doing with diet sodas, I hate to admit it, and caffeine, and some of the high carb. Back then it was a fat-free, high carb caffeine diet, which really doesn't help with anxiety. Then I have 2 boys, and my first son, early on, we started noticing when he was 5 that things were a little bit off, and he has struggled with bipolar disorder for years. I mean, he got diagnosed with rapid cycling bipolar disorder in his, when he was 6 years old. And he, 3 years ago, was the victim of a hit and run accident where he was run down by a car, left for dead in the street, and suffered a massive traumatic brain injury. So now I've got, I'm like a traumatic brain injury and bipolar disorder. And one of the things that I did early on with him was I was in graduate school for nutrition, and I actually jumped out of one school and went in and studied pharmacology, so I'd really understand the interaction between the psych meds, because, at some levels you have to have, with my son, he has to be on some psych meds, but also some of those psych meds, how they interact with nutrition, what you can do with nutrition so you can use as low a dose as possible and offset any of the side effects. So when he had this traumatic brain injury, one of the big things we were able to do to help him come back, because the doctors basically told us to let him die, was to give him high-dose fish oil, amongst some other things like amino acid therapy. And it was featured on Sanjay Gupta on CNN and the doctors and Dr. McCullough's website. But, I'm happy to say he is thriving now, and he has his first job and is a happy guy. And literally, we were told to let him die. And we had major struggles with him with bipolar disorder over the years that we were able to stabilize. Couldn't do it with drugs alone, couldn't do it with nutrition alone. It was the combination of the two, but really the nutrition that made all the difference. And the best example of this was a call we got from the school early on saying, you need to pick up your son, he's climbing the walls. And I go, what are you talking about? And we'd had him on a gluten-free, dairy-free diet, low sugar impact, and they'd given him M&Ms. And he'd gone off the rails. And I'm kind of thinking, well, I'm not going to pick him up. You keep him, you did it.
You gave him the M&Ms.
Guess what? Take him home. So it's so obvious when you watch kids. You can see so quickly if you crank them up with high sugar impact foods and don't give them enough good healthy fats, what happens. And it's not pretty.
So, perhaps that's exactly where we need to start, JJ. at some point, I would love to talk a little bit more about, because there's a key message already that we've given our audience, and that is, nutrition alone might not always do it. Pharmaceutical drugs alone won't do it. It's finding the balance of both and helping our audience to understand that there are ways and means of learning what the interaction is between pharmaceutical drugs and nutrition, and learning what they are, and learning how we can work with nutrition to lower the need for pharmaceutical medication. So I'd love us to touch on that at some point. But maybe we start with the awareness around what you've just said, which essentially is sugar and high sugar impact foods, and what is that doing to our ability to manage or not manage anxiety and depression.
Yeah, and when I say high sugar impact, that's a different term. And what I discovered over the years, I wrote a book called The Virgin Diet that looked at food intolerance. And you look at things like gluten and dairy, and gluten, dairy, and sugar are really a trifecta for the brain. They have an opiate-like effect on the brain, and they're very addictive. But it became very clear when I wrote that book that people were super confused about sugar, and that we were looking at sugar all wrong. And, all carbohydrates turn to sugar unless they're fiber. It's just a matter of how quickly this happens. You want to teach your body to make sugar from the foods you eat, not to mainline it. So what I did was I looked at foods, and I took into account how much fructose they had, which is the most dangerous sugar of all, how much they raise your blood sugar and insulin, and then I contrasted that with fiber and nutrient density, so that foods that might look like they're okay, like artificial sweeteners, which are horrible for your brain, as we know, are neuroexcitatory and can cause some seizures, as well as messing up your gut and causing problems with blood sugar. But you look at things like artificial sweeteners, or even wheat bread that can raise your blood sugar more than table sugar can, or skim milk that's basically liquid sugar. It takes those and it puts them into a high sugar impact category. So we start to look at things for the impact that they have on your body, not just, oh, here's the sugar cubes, because it's so much more than that. But what is clear to me is that when you balance your blood sugar, a whole lot of stuff gets fixed. And if you want to help with anxiety and depression, the first place to start really is with food. Because what you want to see is how much of this is happening because of high sugar impact foods and things like gluten and dairy. And then you can go in and do nutrients, and if you need to, medications, because as you said, there are people, my son's one of them, that have to be on medication. So this is about using the best of all worlds. I'm a very integrative person with all of that. I don't think we throw one thing out. So if you're eating a high sugar diet, first of all, it might feel good initially because it will drive serotonin into the brain, but that doesn't last long, and then you crash. And you go down even lower than you were when you first started. Unstable blood sugar can really trigger anxiety and depression. In fact, my bipolar son, one of the big things that we'll see is if his blood sugar goes down, he gets massive anxiety, and it's very quick because he was on a specific medication that makes your blood sugar unstable. A medication is supposed to treat bipolar disorder, makes your blood sugar unstable and triggers it. It's like, well, this is silly, And then also we know that sugar can raise cortisol. And if you raise stress hormones, you're going to also raise anxiety. And then, of course, if you're eating a high sugar impact diet, you can become more insulin resistant, which then is going to get in the way of your body being able to get those messages to your brain of the happy serotonin and dopamine. So you'll start to block that receptor activity too. So all of those things, again, I think the first rule is to start to balance blood sugar by lowering sugar impact, by eating healthy fats, getting in clean, lean protein that our body needs to make those brain chemicals like dopamine, serotonin, GABA. You have to have good protein to get the amino acids to make those. And then the healthy fats. And if I had to pick one thing, one of the easiest ways to lower your sugar impact is to increase the right types of fats in your diet, because you'll crowd it out, right? Instead of thinking about what you're going to take out, a great place to start is what are we going to put in, and then crowd out the bad. And increasing your omega-3s, which is, I had my son on omega-3s prior to the hit and run accident, which is, I think, one of the reasons he's still here, because it protects your brain. But, this should be step one in treating depression, since our brain is over 60% omega-3 fats. is to start getting more fish and fish oil. I don't see people being able to get this through fish alone. Most people are not going to eat fish 3 times a day, right? So, and they're getting a lot of the pro-inflammatory fats and crowding out the good fats. So it's really making sure you're getting enough of good healthy fats like coconut oil and avocado and extra virgin olive oil, but also supplementing with a high quality fish oil.
Okay, so there's a couple of really key messages that I'm hearing there. That is, understand what high impact sugars are as opposed to just sugar itself. Can we summarize for our listeners a real comprehensive understanding of those high impact sugars? So you already mentioned gluten, dairy, anything that's low fat, whereby they're adding sugars back into it. Would that be one of them?
So I like to say that a low fat diet is a high sugar diet, and a high sugar diet puts a lot of fat in your body. Most of the time when you're pulling the fat out, you're adding something in, and it's generally a sugar that you're adding in. I divided foods into 7 categories, and it's roots, fruits, grains, low fat and no fat dairy and diet foods, dressings, drinks, and sweeteners. And then in each of those categories, I've indicated what's high, medium, or low sugar impact. But basically something that's closer to nature. Obviously protein foods like grass-fed beef, wild salmon, pastured pork and chicken, these are low sugar impact. They don't have the carbohydrates. And straight healthy fat are low sugar impact. You've got to look at the carbohydrates. That's where you're going to get the issue. And then you want to look at what has a lot of fiber and what's as whole foods as possible. So low sugar impact, high sugar impact would be, say, potato chips. Low sugar impact, medium sugar impact would be a sweet potato, and low sugar impact would be pumpkin. So you're going to go down the line of less refined, more whole foods, higher fiber, lower natural sugars. And the important point there is that we've got this crazy idea that because it's natural, it's okay. I mean, like, oh, it's honey, it's all natural. But your body doesn't know the difference between white table sugar that's been colored brown. So you could say brown sugar, sugar in the raw that they haven't gotten the color out of yet, honey. They all are the same. When your body gets it in your mouth, it starts breaking it down and it reads it as sugar, as glucose and fructose, and then it handles it that way. So the whole it's all natural thing won't work here, right?
Again, around organic, just because it's organic sugar, we all of a sudden think that it's better for us.
I know,
and
organic.
Right? Exactly. So, there's a lot of awareness around what marketing, people paid a lot of money to make things attractive to us and appeal to the way we're educated, and that is that organic is the best. And I, educate with my clients that organic and certified organic doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best. You have to understand where your food is coming from, what processes it's been through, and that is a far higher stamp of approval to know where it comes from, as opposed to just the organic stamp itself.
Well, like, let's look at it. You could have organic apple juice.
Yeah.
Organic apple juice has more fructose than a Coke.
Wow, right? I didn't know that.
So you look at this. Yes, you actually have more fructose. Apples are the highest fructose fruit. So organic apple juice has more fructose than a soda does. And there are a lot of green drinks out there that have more sugar than a soda does. But you look at it and go, well, it's a green drink, even though it's got 5 servings of fruit and it's organic. So you really have to be aware of these things and know what you're getting. And it's all about creating that blood sugar balance. That's really the key point here, is lowering your sugar impact, making sure that the carbohydrates you do eat are high fiber carbohydrates, getting optimal amounts of protein so that you can build the neurotransmitters in your brain, and good healthy fats is the key. And when you have the fat, fiber, protein trifecta, it's easy to balance your blood sugar. You don't have the cravings. And so you want to, again, if you've been suffering with depression or anxiety, or you have someone in your family you want to do everything you possibly can to stabilize this. And then that's always been my philosophy. Do everything you can. Start with your lifestyle, your mindfulness, your diet, your exercise, and then if you need to, and nutrients, then you add in the medications. But, if you're suicidal, guess what? add in the medications, right?
For sure, for sure. So coming back to the good quality proteins and the good quality fats, you've mentioned the importance of omega-3. Can I ask you a question around, I know certainly here in Australia we have to be careful about, again, the quality of the omega-3 that
Yeah.
we're getting in. You mentioned before the likelihood of people eating fish 3 times a day, it's just unrealistic. What kind of things do we have to think about when we're actually sourcing a good, clean omega-3 product? And do you have one that you would recommend that, you trust?
Yeah, you want to make sure that you want to see where the fish came from, how they processed it, because what you don't want, you want to avoid two things. You want to make sure they're using small fish so they didn't accumulate heavy metals, and that they then didn't let it get oxidized, right? So they didn't open it up, let the oil oxidize. So those are the two things. What I've seen with and obviously you wouldn't want to use like farm-raised fish, but what I've seen that I recommend is this is not a place to save money. Like this is one where you're going to spend money for good fish oil. And there's some great brands out there. I tend to like what I would call professional grade products, something sold through healthcare professionals. So one I use is from a company called Designs for Health. I'm not sure if it's there in Australia, but like Carlson's and Nordic Naturals are all good brands too. And you can find those ones at most of the health food stores. Again, I'm not sure what's there in Canada,
Oh,
but it
we
is
have
one where you
Nordic
want.
Naturals.
Do
Yes.
you? Yeah. So
Yeah.
Nordic Naturals
Okay.
is a great, well-known brand, and Omega-3 Care was the one that sent me the fish oil when my son was in the hospital. But you do want to know where that is coming from. What's the source? And are they following good manufacturing processes? Are they testing for heavy metals, PCBs? Because the deal is fat stores toxins, right?
Yeah.
So you do not
Yeah.
want to have this be a toxin carrier that you're doing. You don't want to make a good thing bad. You also want to make sure that you're buying it in small bottles or caps and that you're not leaving the top off because it will oxidize, right? That's the big thing with omega-3s. They burn easily. So that's good and that's bad.
So you recommend refrigeration?
It depends where you live. You wouldn't obviously want to keep fish oils out in a warm place. So, it just depends where you live, when you open the bottle, and how fast you're using it. If it's a liquid, absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Capsules a little more leeway. Depends on that heat of the house.
Which for, again, it depends where in Australia you live, but, our summers can certainly make anything a liquid form. Our coconut oil will turn into a liquid form.
Yes, if your coconut oil is turning into a liquid form, put your fish oil in the fridge.
Fridge. That's
It's always better to be safe than sorry, because you can't unring the bell. Once it's oxidized, it's done. I used to take fish oil and bite into it when my clients would bring it to me to see if they had a good fish oil or not, because you can taste the rancidity. And I finally went, this is disgusting. Like, I don't need to do this. So get really high quality brands. There's a real takeaway, and treat them with care.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Look, before we start discussing the benefits of exercise and why, practitioners aren't necessarily using that in the way they could to help alleviate depression and anxiety, can we just, you mentioned right at the beginning, and I think this is a really important point, what are some of the key takeaways that you can offer our audience around understanding the interrelationship between nutrition and, let's say, antidepressants or pharmaceutical drugs that people may need to be aware of, that you yourself have understood through the treatment with your son?
Well, I think one of the challenges I see out there in the world, and I have a lot of really amazing integrative doctor friends, and pharmacists who've really helped me with this. One of them who's amazing with drug nutrient interactions and depletions is Dr. Hyla Cass. And so the first thing is that if a doctor doesn't know about this, and there's a lot of very conventional psychiatrists, and I see if they're not up on it, they're down on it. So they'll just tell you no. So, I would tell you to do your own research and find a doctor that's not that way, right? Because they are out there. Make sure that you're getting the core basics. So obviously it starts with a good diet and then a good multivitamin mineral formula. And that's not going to be a one a day, because you can't get all that stuff in one pill. And make sure it's a capsule, not a tablet. things that you really want to look at that you want to make sure you're getting high quality enough of are B vitamins. And one of the key ones, like B6 and B12, are needed to build these brain chemicals, to build the neurotransmitters, dopamine and GABA and serotonin. So if you are depleted in your B vitamins, which so many people are, or low in them, or you're a vegetarian, you really need to make sure. It's just one of those things that I think everyone should be on a good B complex and maybe a little extra B12, even in the shots. I do sublingual B12. But if someone's low, you're going to want to have them do shots for a while to get it up. And vitamin C, and it's funny because vitamin C is not a very sexy vitamin, but oh my gosh, this is such a critical one. It's the number one vitamin used by the adrenal glands. Sugar competes with it to get into the cells, so sugar is just going to make, deplete it more. Stress depletes it more. And you can actually lower your cortisol and reduce your stress hormones just by taking adequate vitamin C. So vitamin C and B complex are such biggies, and they're inexpensive to take. I mean, this plus fish oil, those are like the trifecta for nutrients. And if you look at what most of these medications deplete, they deplete vitamin B, all the B6 especially, and B12 and folic acid. So they'll deplete those. So you're taking B6, B12, and 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate for your folic acid. And they deplete vitamin C, and they deplete magnesium. These are ones that tend to get depleted very easily. You can go and Google and find out which nutrients are depleted by your supplements, and or your medications, and that should be step one, is make sure that what you're taking, if it's depleting things, that you're repleting those, because a lot of times the nutrients that they're depleting are ones we tend to be low in already. And again, if you're on, say, an SSRI, and you don't have enough serotonin and you didn't have the B vitamins there in the first place, or you weren't getting adequate protein, you wouldn't be able to make it anyway. One of the challenges I see out there with things like SSRIs, and it just makes me crazy because there's this weird whole concept that you shouldn't take 5-HTP, which goes and enters your brain to become serotonin, that you shouldn't take that with an SSRI. But in reality, what these SSRIs do is put the gas pedal down on your serotonin. So they don't make more. They just keep it around. But if you didn't have enough to begin with, you're going to have a problem. So I've always worked with integrative psychiatrists and brought up people's 5-HTP, working with them, so that we can get their serotonin up higher naturally and maybe even get them off their SSRI, or at least down lower on it. So, and you can do the same thing with tyrosine if you're on one of the SNRIs, where it's both serotonin and dopamine. So part of this is to look, when you're looking at someone taking drugs, start with good diet, add in nutrients that have been classically depleted, add in fish oil, right? And then start to look at what's the mechanism of action that this drug is trying to do. Is it trying to keep serotonin around more? Is it trying to keep serotonin and dopamine around more? Is it trying to calm you down, maybe with GABA? And then work with your integrative doc to bring those levels up. If it's serotonin, that would be 5-HTP. If it's dopamine, that would be acetyltyrosine. If it's calming you down, that would be theanine, that's going to convert to GABA. So simple stuff, but again, a lot of the doctors I've seen, the more conventional psychiatrists, they have an idea that if you do that, you're going to end up with too much. And you remember, you started out with too little in the first place.
Yeah. Look, really, really great information, and building awareness with our audience that, perhaps in the back of their minds, they have, an inkling that nutrition, is something that they have to work on. But how many times people who are either carers, health coaches, or people actually suffering from depression, anxiety, how many times they actually think about the interaction between the drug that they're taking, the medication they're on, and what key nutrients that medication might be depleting in their body, and therefore understanding how to supplement through good diet and then supplements on top of that, if needed. I think that is just such a key message for people to really educate themselves more on, so they can support themselves on whatever medication they're on, to actually support the body to do a better job, rather than deplete the body in other areas as a result of being on the medication, which
exactly.
just
And I believe probably the best book for this is Dr. Hyla Cass wrote a book on this called Supplement Your Prescription.
Wow,
It just
fantastic.
came to me. I was like, what was the name of the book Hyla wrote? Hyla helped me with my son when he was in the hospital. I've known her for, gosh, I don't know, almost 20 years. And she's been at the forefront of this. So there's a simple resource that you can grab to help you with this.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. So let's move into the area of exercise, because it's such, again, another area of your expertise, and something that perhaps you feel isn't used enough as a way of managing depression, anxiety. But then I'm sure that there's also perhaps exercise has to be used intelligently
Yeah.
for people that have depression, anxiety. Otherwise, we could actually end up exacerbating their symptoms and their experience. Would that be right?
Well, I like to say that exercise is just like a drug, which means that you got to use the right amount. But especially with someone who's got maybe adrenal exhaustion, it can create a problem. But for the most part, I'm more concerned about over medications than, over exercise. Here's the things with exercise that are so important. Number one, you you look at this, Joanna, and if you could say this about a drug, everyone would be prescribing it, just like with fish oil and diet, right? Just the studies show that it can be as effective as an antidepressant. But again, it's looking at, well, what type should you do? There's a couple different things that I have people do, and it really depends on what's going on with them. If someone needs to manage their anxiety, I really like to have them do burst style training, because burst training actually helps your sympathetic nervous system learn how to handle stress better, because you go all out like sprinting and then you recover and walk it off. And then you go all out and then you recover and walk it off. So it really helps with that. It also has a similar beta endorphin effect of, the same type of endurance training, but you get it in a lot faster. You get a lot faster than you would there. Now, if someone is depressed and looking to boost their serotonin, what I love them to do most is go out for a walk in the sunshine, right, with a friend. And that also brings up one other key nutrient that I didn't bring into play, which when I thought sunshine, I was like, vitamin D. If you don't have optimal levels of vitamin D, nothing's going to work well for you. So the things that you need to check out as you're getting the whole thing started is you need to make sure that you've got somewhere in the 50 to 80 NGs per ml of 25 hydroxy vitamin D. That's a simple lab test that your doctor can do. And of course, also make sure that you have good thyroid levels. I've seen so many clients who came in and, had always been fine their whole life. They're in their 40s and they're getting depressed or they're getting anxious. And it was just because they were getting hypothyroid. So that's when you have to rule out. But going for a walk in the sunshine is a great way to lower stress hormones, also control anxiety, boost serotonin. So that's another key one. One of the other things that happens with exercise is it improves insulin sensitivity. And if you can handle insulin better, you have better blood sugar balance and your receptors are more open to be able to hear the messages of all the chemicals. So that's key too. And then one other piece, and that is doing some kind of yoga. Now, I wish I could say that I could do this because I'm the classic person who needs it. But for some reason, and this is a key point, like when you think of what you can do for stress management, it's really what makes you feel the best. I know that if I'm feeling anxious and stressed, going for a hike in the hills in the sunshine by myself does it. Going to a yoga class for some reason stresses me out more. But if that yoga class helps lower your stress hormones, awesome. Do that. I have to go to the gym and throw things around or go and burst train or go for a hike. So find your bliss with that, but it really is about getting out there and doing it regularly. I have my son doing exercise regularly because part of it is that it's going to increase, there's about a 5% increase in blood flow to the brain. So it's oxygenating your brain as well, which is key. So it helps your body handle stress better. It's going to help oxygenate the brain, get that blood flow going.
Amazing information. And in the short time that we have, what I feel we're doing is really synthesizing the key points that people need to hone in on and almost get a pen and start checking the boxes off for themselves. And also, what we're able to do here is give people really great resources to go and find out more information about this, which is just fantastic. So here's a big question, okay? And you know, I feel that a lot of people know it, okay? A lot of people will just say, oh, it's common sense. I need my sleep.
Mm.
And yet, how many people actually, you know, follow through and, you know, do what is so common sense to us? And we know that sleep is Mother Nature's most powerful anabolic force. Yet, how well do we actually use it? So I really want you to delve into that for us.
You know, if I could just pick one thing when someone comes to me to help them slow down the aging process, be in a better mood, be able to focus better, lose weight, it's sleep. It's sleep. And you hear so many people complain about energy. And when they complain about energy, my first question is sleep, because they're like, do you have a supplement for energy? I'm like, well, yes, vitamin S for sleep. Um, so the challenge is that you start to, especially if you've got anxiety, boy, it can really interrupt your sleep. And then you need to work on that. Some of the things I've seen help with sleep, obviously vitamin C for lowering cortisol, and DHEA can do that in the evening as well. But I use GABA or theanine and melatonin and 5-HTP to help with sleep. In fact, I take that every single night. The deal with sleep, one poor night of sleep, just one, makes you more insulin resistant. When you're more insulin resistant, you have trouble controlling your blood sugar. When you have trouble controlling your blood sugar, you're going to have more issues with anxiety. You'll also be more, when you're more insulin resistant, you can't get your brain chemicals, your body can't hear them as well because the receptors get less receptive. So you don't hear things as well. In fact, there was an amazing study done on insulin resistant women because they found they had higher levels of depression and lower levels of serotonin. So they gave them 5-HTP to help boost their mood. It also helped them lose the weight. So being more insulin sensitive, having better control of your cortisol, because if you don't sleep well, your cortisol is higher, your insulin, leptin, and ghrelin are out of control, you're hungrier, and you're not hungrier, by the way, for chicken and salmon, you're hungrier for carbs, and then you get on a carb caffeine roller coaster, which increases the anxiety, and then you can't sleep again. So if you look at one time, it is the time you rebuild, it's the time you're making your brain chemicals, it's the time you're raising your growth hormone. It is the most critical thing that you can do to improve everything, not just your depression, anxiety, and overall mood, but all of the aging, all of your hormonal balance, because hormonal balance is critical for a good mood. You look at people as they're getting older and their estrogen or testosterone drops. Those are both natural antidepressants. As those get wonky, and they can get wonky from poor sleep and stress, then you'll have more problems. So the other piece of that is like what makes for a good night's sleep. Being able to go to sleep within a half hour of getting into bed easily, staying asleep throughout the night. You should be waking up off and on. It's great now that we have those devices that can track that. Waking up without an alarm clock, feeling rested, and you're somewhere in the 7 to 9 hours range. The average is 8 hours and 15 minutes. And it just depends. I know there's the very small group of people who are short sleepers, 2 to 3 hours, and I've been doing this 30 years, and I've met one of them. Because people always say there are the short sleepers. They're like 1/4 of 1% of the population. It's not you, right? So get that sleep.
Very true. And I think, something you mentioned there, which is really important, is for people to realize that it's not just how many hours of sleep that you're getting. It's the quality of the sleep whilst you're asleep.
Exactly. And those tracking devices are awesome because they can tell you by how much you're moving around if you're having quality sleep or not. You shouldn't be having to get up a couple times a night to go to the bathroom, right? You shouldn't be aware of waking up throughout the night. I mean, in general, you should be able to sleep through the night and track your sleep with a Basis or a Fitbit or whatever you're using so that you can make sure that you're spending, that you're getting the quality sleep you need.
So what other things do you think that we, could give as thoughts or ideas to our listeners around how to actually get a better quality night's sleep? So I know that, some things that I've had to work with my clients is really qualifying whether or not exercise after work at 6 or 7 o'clock at night is actually the best time to exercise. And I know for a lot of people that's a big challenge. A lot of people say, well, it's the only time in the day that I get. We have to weigh up the cost of, well, if that exercise at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and some clients I've had to train to, stop going to the gym at 10 p.m.
Oh my
because,
gosh.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're like, well, I have to do that. It's the only way I can unwind. Well, what are the other ways in which we can encourage people to unwind other
Right.
than, pump it out in the gym or on a treadmill?
Well, they're not unwinding then either.
Exactly.
When you look at it, you want to be sleeping. There's early birds and night owls genetically. So you want to find your perfect timing, but you still want to sleep during the normal circadian rhythm. I lived in Japan for a while and I was teaching aerobics way back when, and I had to teach this 8 o'clock aerobics class, and I went to bed at 2 every night because I was so fired up from it. Ideally, if you have to work out after work, it should be after work, like 5 or 6 o'clock at night. And you should be doing not a big, intense, hour long workout. If you're doing short burst training, then it will work a lot better and actually will help you prepare for bed. The great things for you to prepare for bed is and I stole this from Dr. Michael Bruce, the sleep doctor. He calls it the power down hour. So an hour before you're planning to go to bed, you turn it off, because the worst thing we possibly can do is use iPads, iPhones, computers, where that screen is going to light up your neurons. And, the worst of the worst of the worst is to read your email, because something's going to come up that you can't do anything about, that now you're not going to sleep well from, right? Now it's like, right? Don't have your phone by your bed, because you know that if you have your phone by the bed and you wake up, you're going to turn it on and then your brain's going to light back up again. And then, of course, there's going to be something that you see, a text or something, that you are going to want to respond to at 2 a.m, which is ridiculous. I've watched my clients, and if they send me an email or text at, between like 11 and 5, they are in deep trouble. So you have to really, you have to use some willpower there and get that phone where you cannot reach it if you wake up at night. Can't reach it, and it's turned off, it's not buzzing. And that hour before you go to bed is a putter hour, and you're turning the lights down, you're turning the air down somewhere in the 65 to 68 degrees. I don't know what it is. Are you Celsius? Because I don't know what that is, Celsius. But you're getting it cold in the house. Take a hot bath and then get out of the bath, because it's going to help your body cool down faster. Get some lavender going. If you want some calming music, get that going. But the lights are dimmed, and you're preparing your body as if you were outside, because really we are still 10,000 years old. And 10,000 years ago, we would have had to go to sleep because it was getting dark. We slept more during the winter, less during the summer, which, by the way, we're more insulin resistant during the summer because we slept less. But the natural light would wake us up, and the natural dark would help us go to sleep. And we had a normal circadian and cortisol rhythm because of that. Now we artificially manipulate that with light. So you want to make sure that you're not running around with the TV on and stimulating stuff going on and bright lights, and then try to turn that all off and go to sleep, because it's not going to work. Right? And you don't want to go to bed hungry. So you eat a good meal, but 3 hours before. You also don't want to go to bed stuffed. So, make sure you're eating enough throughout the day. And if you need to, take some calming nutrients. Again, things like GABA, melatonin, 5-HTP are ones that I particularly like. And you should be sleeping in a pitch black room, because that's what your body needs to make melatonin. So pitch black room, cool, no lights from alarm clocks or phones or anything that you can see, because that will block some of the melatonin production. And it should be cool, super cool room. And of course, comfortable bed. And no disruptive things in the bed, like, I have a dog who sleeps with me, I admit it, but she actually sleeps longer than I do and doesn't move. So as long as she doesn't snore, we're all good.
I think that's a really important point there. I actually had to start to close the bedroom door because we're in spring right now here in Australia, so we're moving into the warm weather, and our cat loves now to go out at night and comes back in the early hours of the morning, will jump on the bed and that will wake me up, disturb me at like
Yeah.
3 or 4 in the morning. So I've actually had to start closing the bedroom door so that he's on a different rhythm to me now in the summer,
Exactly.
and I have to take the measures and be self-disciplined and self manage what I know needs to change.
Exactly. The
So
only reason the dog sleeps with me is because she does sleep longer than me. It's like ridiculous. You try to wake her up in the morning and you get like, the growls. I'm like, all right, fine, you stay asleep.
So what advice would you give around people that are still learning to manage their stress, still learning to manage their energy, and they're still tending to buy their energy? What I call buying your energy, when you're still relying on coffee and you're still relying on stimulants and caffeine, and you're out there, half life of caffeine is what, like 6 hours?
And it really depends on your genetics because some people are slow metabolizers and some people are fast metabolizers. And that's what you really have to watch. I'm always amazed about the people who can have the caffeine at night and go to sleep, but there are those people who are fast metabolizers. I'm not one of them. So, and most people are not one of them, besides the fact that caffeine depresses your alpha brain waves. So it's got some other issues too. So a little in the morning, yes. A little later in the afternoon, no. But you also know yourself and know what you can tolerate and handle. I know I can have some ice cream tea in the early afternoon and be fine, but not espresso, right? I think the important thing here is that all of this is a journey. And what you don't want to do is create more stress by trying to do all of it at once, right? And so you look at all of these things, and there's stuff I'm working on, and there's stuff I will, once I get through this, then I'll work on the next thing. And that's awesome. We're never done, right? We're not going to be finished. So if you've heard all this, there's probably something in what you've heard that you went, oh, I'm not doing that. And if I had to do a hierarchy, I'm going to put sleep right up there at the top. But then, of course, creating a diet that's balanced between the healthy fats, protein, and fiber, and then filling in with first the basics of a good multivitamin, mineral, antioxidant formula, and fish oils, adding in C, D, and B complex, and then any drug nutrient depletions. And then, of course, exercise. But you hear all this, you go, just start with one, make it a habit, go to the next. Because once it's a habit, and that's all we're doing is putting in new habits, then you've got it. Then you go to the next, and use a journal to do all this. I've been journaling for, 20 something years. And it's interesting. They did a study on weight loss, and it doesn't matter whether it's weight loss, whether it's diabetes, whether it's depression, whether it's hypertension, you're doing a health change, right? So you're making changes. And what they found was that people who journaled lost twice the amount of weight as people who didn't. So people, if you want to be successful in whatever the change, the shift is that you're making in your life, journal it. So whatever I'm doing, I'm journaling it every single day until it becomes second nature, and then I move on to the next. And that's what I would tell you to do is you're going to get all this awesome information from this summit. And the cool thing is, like, get it and create a success library, and then just go through and create your own journey and just one by one, work through it and celebrate your wins. Don't beat yourself up if you feel like you didn't, get there fast enough. There's going to be slips along the way, right? But celebrate those wins. And as far as getting off caffeine and getting off sugar, this is not a cold turkey thing. This is a add before you take away. So, add some decaf into your regular coffee, add some green tea in, start taking it down, add in some fat and fiber so that you start taking down the sugar, but taper down off these things so that it's not a shock to your body, because all that tends to make you do is go running to the coffee shop, right?
Yep. I love your idea of tracking your success and logging the experience, because it keeps you more committed, and it keeps you adherent to the program. When you're actually able to see what success you're making along the ways, but you're also able to track where you need to improve. And
Right.
it's a great way of, creating this biofeedback relationship between yourself and your body, which is really where the real changes happen, when you can actually start becoming aware of what your body is telling you, and being able to interpret that And that's a really, empowering experience for people to start having. And then they're no longer, just making choices from the idea of what they think is a good choice, but they're actually starting to listen to their body.
What's wonderful about that, I actually call it my personal discovery process when I'm taking people down on their sugar impact or off of gluten, dairy, soy, corn, peanuts, is you actually connect the dots between what you're doing, whether it's exercise, sleep, diet, nutrients, and how you feel. And it changes your conversation entirely because now you're super aware, wow, when I don't get a good night's sleep, I crave sugar. When I crave sugar, I get anxious. And then I get anxious, then I don't sleep well. Then I don't sleep well, then I crave sugar. It's like, so then the conversation changes. Then it's not like, oh, I think I'm going to stay up another 3 hours to finish that report or go out, because you know the effects of it. Or you'll build in a nap the next day, right? So it's very empowering. And that's the difference, is we really need to think of ourselves as our own personal health detectives. It's in our hands. Don't give that away to someone else. No one's going to care about your health like you do, right? Mm-hmm. And ultimately, you're the one that's going to know what's working for you or what's not. Trust yourself in this.
Yeah, really important message there. As is what you said before about don't bite off more than you can chew. The idea is actually to alleviate your stress, not to create more stress by trying to do everything, all at once and tackle all of the various, habits that we have. So choose one, work well with one, and then move on to the other. I think that's a really, really important message out there. And become aware of whether or not you're trying to do something and it's actually elevating your stress levels, because that's feedback right there that perhaps you're taking more on than what you're ready for. So,
or it just isn't working for you. Like, again,
exactly.
Every year I would make this New Year's resolution that I would do yoga, and then it became this whole thing, And I finally went, stop it. I don't have to do that. Like, this one doesn't work for me, So again, pick the ones that work for you, and don't feel like don't need to feel guilty about something that's not working for us.
Yeah. Awesome. JJ, fantastic information. Thank you so much. I'm going to just leave you with one question to share the answer to with us. We're asking all of our speakers to share with us an inspiring I am affirmation, and we're putting them all together, and we're going to be able to download a Healthy Me Summits affirmation for our audience, and keep them in tuned every day with being able to read a different one. What would your I am statement be?
I am never better than when I am challenged.
Wow. Fantastic. I love that one. That's, that has you step up and meet the challenge of where you are at any given point. I love it.
Thank you. And it's a reframe too,
yes,
right? Because
exactly.
sometimes we look at those and go, think of those as an opportunity.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing with us your time, your knowledge, and your wisdom, your experience that's come over the years of actually working with anxiety, and having that present in your family is allowing you to now share this information that is so very important for so many people. So thank you for being so open and honest and willing to share your experience, because I know that's how other people are willing to learn and open and receive the information.
My pleasure. It's been an honor to be with you.